There are some final words you just can't forget. I love you all. That's what a man said moments before he was put to death. But just 27 years earlier, he had taken 2 lives in less than 24 hours. And the way he did it? It wasn't random. It was a pattern. So before we get into this, do me a quick favor. Hit like and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be told. And the more people who see them, the harder it is for cases like this to ever be forgotten. It didn't start with violence. It started with a childhood that almost sounds unreal. Michael Zack was born into chaos. Even before he entered the world, things were already going wrong. His mother had been in a car accident while pregnant, and reports say alcohol was involved. But what came after that was even worse. Growing up, he lived in a home where fear was normal. His stepfather wasn't just strict, he was brutally abusive, the kind of abuse that goes beyond discipline and crosses into something far darker. As a child, Zack was subjected to extreme punishments and trauma that no one should ever experience. And at just 3 years old, he was already being hospitalized after being forced into harmful situations. But the moment that truly shattered everything came when he was just 12 years old, because that's when he witnessed something that would stay with him forever. His own mother being killed inside their home. Just like that, everything collapsed. And from that point on, there was no normal life waiting for him. He was placed into foster care, alone, traumatized, and already broken in ways most people couldn't understand. But instead of escaping that past, it followed him. As he grew older, Zack didn't build a new life. He drifted. Petty crimes, theft, constant run-ins with the law, moving from state to state, never staying in one place long enough to build anything real. But here's what made him different. He knew how to make people feel sorry for him. He would tell his story about his childhood, about what he witnessed, and people believed him. They felt for him. They wanted to help. And that became his advantage. In 1996, after serving time for theft-related offenses, he was released from jail. And for a brief moment, it looked like he might get another chance. A bartender took pity on him, gave him a job, tried to help him get back on his feet. But within days, he disappeared, taking her truck with him. Not long after that, another man offered him a place to stay after hearing his story. Zack repaid that kindness by stealing from him too, guns and money, before vanishing again. That's when things took a darker turn, because now it wasn't just theft anymore. On June 13, 1996, everything escalated. At a beach bar, Zack met a woman named Lori. It seemed like a normal interaction, 2 people talking, drinking, nothing unusual. But behind that conversation, something else was happening. He gained her trust, and then he convinced her to leave with him. They went somewhere more private, and that's when things turned violent. What happened next was brutal and senseless. Lori never made it back. Her life ended on that beach after being lured there by someone she had just met. Someone who just moments earlier seemed completely normal. But as horrifying as that was, it still wasn't the end, because what happened next would shock even investigators. Less than 24 hours later, he did it again. Another beach, another bar, another conversation. This time, the victim was Rivone Smith. Just like before, Zack approached her, talked with her, gained her trust. There was nothing outwardly alarming about him, and that's what made it so dangerous. At some point, she allowed him into her home, and once he was inside, everything changed. The situation escalated quickly into violence, and by the time it was over, another life had been taken. But this time, there was something different. After the attack, Zack didn't just leave. He took items from the home, electronics, personal belongings, and tried to pawn them.
That decision would become his mistake, because now people were starting to notice, and his time was running out. Just days later, it all came crashing down. Zack was found hiding in an empty house. When police caught up to him, the story unraveled fast, and then came the confession. He admitted to both crimes. Investigators began piecing everything together, and what they discovered was chilling. This wasn't random. There was a pattern. He targeted people in bars. He gained their sympathy. He earned their trust, and then he used it against them. That realization changed everything, because now this wasn't just a suspect. This was someone the prosecution would later describe as a calculated predator. But in court, the narrative became more complicated.
During the trial, Zack didn't deny what happened, but he tried to explain it. His defense team argued that he wasn't fully in control, that years of trauma combined with mental conditions had left him impulsive, unstable, unable to think clearly in critical moments. They pointed to his past, the abuse, the trauma, the things he witnessed as a child. They argued that all of it had shaped who he became. But the prosecution saw it differently. They didn't see someone overwhelmed by trauma. They saw someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone who followed a clear pattern, someone who used his past not as an excuse, but as a tool, to manipulate, to gain trust, to get close, and then to strike. After hearing everything, the jury made their decision. Guilty on all counts. And when it came time for sentencing, they recommended the ultimate punishment: death. But even that wasn't the end of the story, because Zack spent decades on death row. Years turned into decades, appeal after appeal, arguments about his mental condition, debates about whether his past should have changed his fate. Some groups even pushed for his sentence to be reduced, arguing that his condition should have exempted him. But the courts didn't agree. One by one, his appeals were denied. Yet during that time, something unexpected happened. Zack changed, at least on the surface. He got married while in prison. He built relationships. He wrote letters. He stayed away from substances. And to some, it looked like a different person, which raised a difficult question. Can someone truly change after doing something like that? Or is it already too late? Eventually, that question didn't matter anymore. In 2023, the final decision was made. An execution date was set. His lawyers made one last attempt to stop it. Again, they pointed to his mental condition. Again, it was denied. And just like that, there was nothing left to appeal. On the day of his execution, Zack declined a final meal. He met with his wife and spiritual advisor, and then he was brought into the chamber. When asked if he had any last words, he looked at the witnesses and said something no one expected: "I love you all." Moments later, it was over. After everything, after the crimes, after the trial, after decades of waiting, it ended in just a few minutes. But the questions didn't end with him, because cases like this leave something behind, not just pain for the families, but a deeper question that's harder to answer. Was he a product of everything he went through, or did he choose the path he took? There's no easy answer. But maybe the most unsettling part of this entire story is how normal it all started. A conversation at a bar, a moment of trust, a decision to help someone, and in an instant, everything changed.